Hi everyone. Tonight we're going to take a look at something that might make you rethink how safe you really are in your own home, or even in your own life. You're probably comfortable right now, right? It's nice, peaceful, maybe even a bit too peaceful. Well, you might want to shake off that sense of security because tonight I'm about to tell you a story that'll make you question how well you really know the people around you.
You won't be able to just dismiss this one as just another creepy story. Trust me. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I'll be waiting for your stories. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight.
It was supposed to be a dream year. A study abroad program in Japan, a place known for its calm, politeness, and incredible respect for others. I had just arrived in Hiroshima, a city full of history, culture, and a deep sense of order. In theory, I was in the perfect place to spend my year, far from the chaos of university life back home, ready to immerse myself in something new. For the most part, that's exactly what happened. The people I met were kind. The food was incredible, and the city itself seemed like a peaceful, respectful place to live. But as any traveler knows, there's always that one experience that shifts your perspective entirely. Mine began one evening at the Sakai Festival, a massive sake drinking event that the entire city seemingly attended. It was lively, loud, and filled with excitement. We drank our fill, laughed with new friends, and danced around, not a care in the world. At the end of the night, I stumbled back to my apartment, exhausted, a little tipsy, and just happy to be where I was. I had barely made it to my futon when I passed out. I don't even remember falling asleep, just the familiar weight of the futon beneath me and the softness of the pillow as I drifted off into nothingness. The next morning, at exactly 6 a.m., the shrill sound of my doorbell jerked me awake. My first thought was, oh, great. It's one of my friends trying to get me up for something. Maybe it was someone coming over to talk about the festival last night. Who knows? But when I peeked through the peephole, I was shocked to see a police officer standing there. A bit dazed, I opened the door, my brain still half in the haze of sleep, and I asked, "Can I help you?" The officer explained that there had been a noise complaint. I remember feeling instantly confused. Noise complaint? What could I possibly have done? Sure, I made a quick phone call to my girlfriend before I went to sleep, but that was it. No loud music. No drunken parties, just me, passing out on my futon after a night of good fun. The officer seemed to realize I had no clue what was going on. And after some confusion and a couple of translations via a phone app, he left. But even as I closed the door, a creeping feeling started to take hold of me. It was bizarre. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The very next morning, just as the sun was starting to peek through the window, I heard it again. Ding dong. The doorbell rang, this time louder, sharper. It was the same officer, but now there were two. The same routine played out. They told me it was a noise complaint again, this time from a neighbor I'd never met. My brain was still trying to catch up. I told them I had literally just woken up and that there had been no noise. As far as I could tell, I hadn't done anything to disturb anyone. After a brief, confused conversation, they agreed it was likely a mistake, and they left. At this point, I felt a little more than just confused. I felt uneasy. Was someone really calling in complaints about me when I hadn't done anything? It didn't sit well. The officers left, but I couldn't help but wonder if I was being harassed by someone, and if so, who? I walked down the hallway to the building manager's office to ask what the heck was going on. After a short conversation, he dropped a bombshell. I had to move apartments. Apparently the neighbor, who I still had never met, had been calling in complaints every morning at 6 a.m. The building manager seemed to imply this wasn't a simple noise complaint. It was something more. But what? Why was I the target of this? I had no answers. I found myself packing my things, not because I wanted to leave, but because I had no choice. I felt like I had no real control over the situation. My new apartment was on the floor below, and while I'd barely settled in, I now had to pack up my life and relocate. That night, I tried to get some sleep, thinking maybe, just maybe, this whole thing would blow over. But of course, the universe had other plans. Around 3 a.m., I was jerked awake again by the loud, unmistakable sound of my doorbell ringing. Over and over again. I was frozen, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing. The sound was deafening, unrelenting. I got out of bed and went to the door, hoping for some clarity. But when I looked through the peephole, there was nothing there. No one was at my door. I was terrified. I had no idea who was doing this, but at that moment, I knew it was her, the neighbor. She was the only person who could be behind this bizarre, disturbing behavior. And at that moment, the dread was palpable. The morning came, and I was moved to my new apartment, still rattled by the events from the night before. I hadn't even fully unpacked yet, but my life had already been turned upside down. As I stepped out onto my new balcony to get some fresh air, I saw something that froze me in my tracks. There she was, the neighbor. I watched, stunned, as she clung to the fence separating our balconies, peering over at me. We locked eyes for a second, and then, just as quickly as she'd appeared, she disappeared to her side of the building. I felt the blood rush to my head. This was real. She wasn't just making complaints. She was actively watching me, and I had no idea why. My heart raced as I turned around, but I heard the sound of the doorbell again. I didn't need to check. I knew it was her. The doorbell didn't stop. It just kept ringing. I stood there, frozen for a few moments, staring at the door. I wasn't sure if it was the fear that paralyzed me, or the absolute confusion that gripped me. But either way, I couldn't move. After everything that had happened, I had no idea who to trust anymore or how to handle the situation. My first instinct was to leave the apartment, but that seemed absurd. Why should I leave when I hadn't done anything wrong? No, I had to face this. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I opened the door, half expecting to see the same officer from the other day. But no, it wasn't a cop. It was a man I didn't recognize, standing there looking as confused as I was. Is this the new tenant? He asked, his voice uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he should even be standing there. I nodded cautiously. Yeah, I just moved in today. What's going on? He looked around, almost as if he was making sure no one else was watching. Then, in a low voice, he said, "You know it's her, don't you? The one who's been calling the cops about you." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. This was the first time anyone had acknowledged the neighbor's strange behavior openly. Up until now, it had all been vague complaints from officers and staff. But here was someone confirming what I feared. Something was wrong with her. Who exactly is she? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid that she might be listening somewhere nearby. He looked around again, checking over his shoulder. She's lived here for a while now, but she doesn't talk to anyone. Always seems off. You're the first person she's ever, well, targeted, I guess. He glanced at the door, as if expecting someone to burst through it. You're probably not going to be able to avoid her for long. She's relentless. I was starting to feel like I was in a nightmare. Like everything that was happening was part of some twisted movie where I was the lead character. And if that was the case, I really didn't want to see what happened in the next scene. The man gave me a knowing look before turning and walking away, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. I closed the door slowly, still trying to process what he had just told me. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding or a lonely neighbor who had gone a little too far with complaints. This was a woman who had, for some reason, decided that I was her focus. I went back to my futon, but sleep was impossible now. I kept replaying every moment from the past few days in my mind. The doorbell ringing, the police showing up again and again, the officer's confusion, her strange behavior, watching me from the balcony. How far would this woman go to make my life a living hell? Later that afternoon, I made my way to the manager's office again. I had no idea what I was going to say, but I had to find out more. The man had mentioned something about her being relentless, and I wanted to know just how much truth there was to that. The building manager was behind his desk, flipping through some paperwork. When I knocked and entered, he didn't look up right away. I need to talk to you about my neighbor, I said, trying to sound as calm as possible despite my growing sense of unease. The one who's been making complaints. I need to know more about her. At that, the manager put the papers down, his face becoming more serious. He leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. I'm afraid you've run into a problem. She's not exactly, well, stable, if you know what I mean. We've had issues with her in the past, a lot of complaints from other tenants, but nobody's ever reported anything directly threatening. The thing is, she doesn't interact with others. She's always isolated, and then, well, there's the noise complaints. But it's more than just that. It's obsessive. His words sent another chill down my spine. Obsessed? It sounded like he was describing a person completely disconnected from reality, fixated on me for reasons I couldn't even begin to comprehend. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? I asked, my voice rising slightly in frustration. I shouldn't be blindsided by this kind of thing. She's been harassing me, and no one thought to give me a heads up. The manager looked uncomfortable, but he didn't try to defend himself. We've had a policy of keeping things quiet. It's always been about the noise. People move in, they move out. They don't want to make waves, so we don't make a big deal about her. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Why had I been left in the dark about this? Why had nobody prepared me for dealing with a person like this? I need to know what you're going to do about it, I said firmly. The manager gave me an apologetic look, but his hands were tied. I can't do much without something more concrete. The best I can do is move you again. But we can't keep moving you without cause, and I don't think we can prove harassment. His words echoed in my mind as I left his office. I was angry, frustrated, and at a complete loss for what to do next. She had already made my life difficult, but now it felt like I was the one being punished for something that wasn't my fault. That night, as I sat on my new futon in my new apartment, I kept hearing that voice inside my head. What's next? The anxiety that had been building since the morning made it hard for me to focus on anything. I tried to sleep, but I kept imagining the look on her face, the way she had stared at me from the balcony. Around 2 a.m., the doorbell rang again. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The sound of the doorbell echoed through my small apartment, piercing the silence of the night like a scream in the dark. I looked at the clock. 2 a.m. Who could it possibly be? My first thought was that it was another strange prank, another twisted move in the game she seemed to be playing with me. But I couldn't be sure. I'd grown paranoid, jumping at every unexpected noise, expecting it to be her, expecting her to do something even worse than what she had already done. I stood there, motionless, staring at the door, the anxiety creeping over me. Should I open it? Should I ignore it? In that moment, I realized just how deep this nightmare had sunk into my mind. I felt trapped, like I was living in a horror movie, unable to escape. The doorbell rang again, louder this time. 3 sharp rings, like a countdown to something terrible. I took a step forward, my legs trembling beneath me. I didn't know what to expect anymore. I couldn't even trust the normal rhythm of life. Everything felt off. Every doorbell, every knock on the door made my pulse race and my body freeze with dread. This wasn't normal. I wasn't just dealing with a noisy neighbor anymore. I was dealing with someone who seemed to derive some kind of sick pleasure from watching me suffer. Slowly, I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. My breath hitched when I saw her standing there. The woman. Her face was pressed against the door, her wide, unblinking eyes staring directly at the peephole, as if she knew I was watching her. She wasn't just standing there, though. She was grinning. The smile was twisted, unnatural, something between a smirk and a snarl. It was the kind of smile you'd see on someone who had lost touch with reality, someone who enjoyed the power of fear they instilled in others. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid she might hear it. My instincts told me to run, to do something, anything. But I couldn't move. I felt like I was in a trance, staring at the door, unable to tear my eyes away from her face. What did she want from me? Why was she doing this? Then it happened. The doorbell rang again. But this time, it wasn't just a ring. It was a constant, endless ringing. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Like a drum beat, it felt like it would never stop. I thought it might drive me mad. I couldn't take it. I was already on the edge. I finally gathered the strength to act. I backed away from the door, my breath shallow, my palms clammy. I picked up my phone and dialed the building manager. There was no way I was letting this go any further. Hello? The manager's groggy voice came through the line. I tried to steady myself before speaking. It's her again, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She's at my door. She won't stop ringing the bell. The manager sounded half awake, confused. Who? Your neighbor? Yes, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. The one who's been complaining about the noise. She's standing right outside my door and I don't know what to do anymore. Please, I need you to help me. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the manager shuffling papers or something, as though he was trying to figure out what to do. His tone shifted, becoming more serious. I'll send someone over. But you need to stay away from the door. Don't engage with her. I'll talk to the police and have them send someone too. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It felt like a small comfort, knowing that someone was finally taking this seriously. But it didn't erase the terror that had built up inside me. The ringing had stopped, but I could still feel her presence. She was out there, watching me, waiting. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. I heard the sirens from a distance and then the sound of their footsteps echoing down the hallway. The officers knocked on my door and I rushed to open it. When I saw them, I felt a sense of relief, though it was quickly replaced by anxiety again. They weren't here to solve anything. They were just going to talk to her. Again. "Stay inside," one of the officers said, his voice calm but firm. "We'll take care of it." I nodded, barely able to speak. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of paranoia and fear, and I had no idea how to keep myself afloat. They left shortly after, and I waited in silence. The minutes felt like hours. I didn't know what they had said to her, but I hoped it was enough to make her stop. But deep down, I knew that I wasn't done with her yet. This was far from over. The next day, I avoided the hallway. I stayed in my apartment, keeping my blinds shut and my door locked. I couldn't bring myself to go outside. I was afraid of seeing her, afraid she'd be lurking somewhere, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. I stayed cooped up in my apartment for a full week. The only time I left was to grab food or do something completely necessary. I lived in a constant state of anxiety, as though my every move was being watched. The worst part was the silence, the constant waiting for something to happen. But when the doorbell rang again, I knew it was just the beginning. The days began to blur together, each one feeling eerily similar to the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was constantly watching me. Even when I tried to distract myself with my studies or pretend that life was normal, that unnerving sensation of being observed was never far from my mind. Every time I left my apartment, I made sure to check the hallway for any sign of her. I started walking with my head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone, trying to make myself invisible, hoping that if I just ignored the world around me, I could escape this nightmare. But I couldn't. I couldn't escape her. The doorbell rang again, but this time it wasn't as frantic as before. There was a deliberate slowness to it, as though she were savoring every ring, knowing the effect it would have on me. I stood frozen in place for what seemed like an eternity, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a simple noise complaint anymore. This was personal. I glanced at the clock. It was just after midnight, a time when most people were sound asleep. Yet there she was, haunting me, torturing me, even in the dead of night. The rational part of me told me to ignore it. I'd survived this long without responding, and surely I could hold out a little longer. But something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to confront this madness head on, or I was going to lose my mind. I slowly walked to the door, my breath shallow, hands shaking. I didn't even want to look through the peephole, afraid of what I might see. But I did it anyway. And there she was, standing outside, her face pressed against the door, just like the last time. But this time, there was something different, something darker about the way she stared at me. Her grin had grown wider, more sinister, and her eyes gleamed with an unsettling mix of satisfaction and malice. She knew she had me. She knew I was terrified. For a moment, I thought about opening the door. I thought about confronting her, demanding an explanation, demanding that she leave me alone. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The fear that had gripped me since the moment I moved in was now all-consuming, suffocating me. I couldn't face her. Not like this. I stepped back from the door, retreating to the farthest corner of my apartment. I sat on the floor, knees pulled up to my chest, my arms wrapped tightly around my legs. My mind raced, my thoughts a jumbled mess of panic and confusion. What had I done to deserve this? Why was she doing this to me? And then, just as I thought I might go mad from the silence, it happened. The doorbell rang again, but this time, it wasn't the ringing that shook me. It was the sound of something scratching against the door, scratching, dragging, scraping. A sharp metallic sound that echoed through the hallway like nails on a chalkboard. I bolted upright, my heart leaping into my throat. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to make it stop. I reached for my phone, dialing the building manager once again. My hands were trembling, but I had no other choice. I needed help. I needed someone to intervene before this got worse. "Hello?" he answered, sounding groggy. But his voice quickly sharpened when he heard the panic in mine. "It's happening again," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's outside my door, scratching at it. I don't know what she's doing, but I'm scared. Please, you have to do something." I could hear him sigh on the other end. "I'm sorry. I know you've been through a lot. But there's really not much we can do unless there's clear evidence of a crime. I've talked to her before, but she's very private. If she's not actively breaking the law, I can't help you." His words hit me like a slap in the face. How could he just dismiss this? How could he not see how serious this was? I wasn't just dealing with an annoying neighbor anymore. I was dealing with a person who had crossed a line. A person who had become obsessed with me to the point of causing me actual distress. "I need more than just advice," I said, my voice breaking. "I need action. She's not going to stop until something happens. I don't know how much longer I can take this." He paused, and for a moment, I thought he might finally understand. But instead, he simply said, "If you feel unsafe, I suggest you call the police again." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling even more now. It was the same answer I'd gotten before. No one was going to help me. I was on my own. The next few days were a blur. I was exhausted from the lack of sleep, from the constant anxiety. Every knock on the door, every strange sound, set my nerves on edge. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't think straight. All I could do was wait for her to come back. And she did. Every night. Without fail. But then something shifted. I started to notice other things. I started to hear whispers in the hallway when I passed by her door. People talking, watching. But when I turned around, no one was there. The walls seemed to be closing in around me. The tension in the building was growing, and I was becoming more and more convinced that I wasn't the only one who was afraid of her. There was something in the air now. A sense of unease, like everyone knew that she was dangerous. But no one was willing to do anything about it. It felt like I was living in a place that wasn't real anymore. Like everything around me had shifted into some kind of twisted reality where the rules didn't apply. And then, one morning, as I was walking to class, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, standing in front of the building, was a figure in the distance. It was her. But this time she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the building manager. I stood frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. The sight of her standing outside the building, her eyes locked on the manager, made my stomach churn. She was so still, like she was waiting for something. I couldn't explain it, but something about her presence made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I watched her for a few moments, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The manager, oblivious to her gaze, was walking towards the building. He didn't seem to notice her, or maybe he was pretending not to, but I could tell she wasn't just standing there. She was watching him, observing every step he took. I felt a strange unease settle in my gut. What was she doing? Why was she so focused on him? The fear I had been living with for the past few weeks intensified, but this time it was mixed with a sense of foreboding, like something worse was coming. I didn't want to stick around to find out, so I quickly turned away and headed towards campus, my footsteps quick and uneven. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something behind, something that was far from over. For the next few days, I tried to pretend everything was fine. I kept my head down, avoided looking around too much, and focused on getting through the day. But the thought of that moment, the way she watched the manager, kept haunting me. It was like a warning, a prelude to something I couldn't yet see. I tried to ignore it, but it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Then, on the 5th day after I had seen her outside, I received an unexpected visit from the building manager. He knocked on my door around 3 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone, so my first instinct was to look through the peephole, making sure it wasn't her. When I saw the manager, I opened the door cautiously. "Hey," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I stepped back to let him in, still on edge. His presence only added to the sense of unease that had settled over me in the last few weeks. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though I already knew the answer. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I need to apologize for not taking your concerns seriously earlier. I know things have been difficult, and I should have done more. But, well, it's complicated." I raised an eyebrow, not sure where this conversation was headed. "Complicated how?" He hesitated, looking at the floor before meeting my eyes again. "The thing is, I don't think she's just some annoying neighbor anymore. She's been escalating. I've heard from other tenants that she's been making threats. Not directly, but there's been talk." A chill ran down my spine. "What kind of talk?" "I don't know all the details," he said quietly. "But people have mentioned her talking about you, and I overheard something a couple of days ago when I was talking to her. She said that you were the problem, that you were the reason for all her issues. She's fixated on you, and it's not healthy. I've been trying to handle it, but I'm worried it's getting out of hand." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My breath caught in my throat. All this time, I thought it was just some weird coincidence or misunderstanding. But now, it was clear that I had become the center of this woman's obsession, and that was far more dangerous than I'd realized. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" I asked, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. He nodded grimly. "I think so. We need to do something about it, but I'm not sure what yet. I don't have the authority to evict her or anything. And the police won't do anything unless there's an actual threat. But I wanted to make sure you knew what was happening." I felt my heart racing again. This was worse than I'd imagined. It wasn't just weird or uncomfortable. It was dangerous. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He looked at me sympathetically. I'll talk to the authorities again. I'll keep you updated. But for now, just stay safe. Keep your door locked, and if she shows up, don't engage with her. Call the police if you need to. I nodded, my mind spinning. I wasn't sure how to process what had just happened. How had it gotten this far? Why hadn't anyone warned me sooner? He left soon after, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I couldn't focus on anything for the rest of the day. My mind kept returning to the same question. What was she going to do next? That night, I locked all my windows and doors. I checked them twice, then 3 times. I pulled the blinds shut, even though it felt suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment, not with her out there, watching. I tried to sleep, but sleep was impossible. Every little noise made my heart race. At some point, I heard the faintest sound, like scratching. I immediately froze, listening carefully. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the usual sounds of the building settling. It was something different. The scratching sound persisted for a few moments before it stopped. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen. But the silence that followed was worse than anything. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know what was going on. So, I grabbed my phone and sent a quick message to the manager. She's here again. I can hear her. The response came quickly. Stay inside. I'll send someone over. But just as I was about to reply, the doorbell rang once more. I hesitated, not knowing if I should respond. What would I do if it was her? The doorbell rang again. 3 sharp, unmistakable chimes, each one cutting through the silence of my apartment like a razor. My heart skipped in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel the sweat beginning to form on the back of my neck, my fingers trembling as they hovered over the phone. Should I answer? Should I ignore it? My mind was a jumbled mess of fear, indecision, and frustration. I glanced at the clock, 2:30 a.m. No one should be at my door at this hour. No one, especially not her. My thoughts raced. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. I was trapped, stuck between the need to protect myself and the dread of confronting whatever she had planned for me next. It felt like a game, her game, and I was the unwilling pawn. Taking a deep breath, I backed away from the door. My instinct told me to hide, to retreat to the farthest corner of the room and wait for this nightmare to pass. But something in me snapped. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly on edge, always hiding from her. No, I had to do something. I forced myself to move toward the door, my body protesting every step. My hand hovered over the doorknob, and for a brief moment, I thought about running. But what good would that do? I couldn't outrun this fear, this feeling of being watched. I had to face it. Face her. I peeked through the peephole again, praying that it wouldn't be her standing there. But I knew better. I could already feel the cold grip of her presence creeping through the door. And there she was, the woman. She was standing in front of my door, her face just inches away from the glass, her eyes wide and unblinking, like she was staring straight into my soul. Her lips twisted into that same chilling grin. This time, however, it wasn't the grin of someone simply trying to get attention. It was darker, more threatening. It was as if she were savoring my fear. I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped, unable to escape her gaze. I had never seen anyone look so consumed by something, anything, before. This was obsession. Pure, terrifying obsession. I backed away from the door again, my heart racing. What was I supposed to do? This wasn't normal. This wasn't just a weird neighbor. This was a person who had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure how much further she was willing to go. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the door. I jumped, my body going rigid in shock. I hadn't expected it to escalate like this, hadn't prepared for it to move into the realm of actual confrontation. The knock was slow, deliberate, like she was trying to make me listen, make me feel her presence on the other side. I could feel her in the air, thick and suffocating, pressing against the door, trying to push through to me. I was no longer in control of the situation. She was. There was no more pretending. I couldn't ignore this. I couldn't hide anymore. It was time to act. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I unlocked it and dialed the building manager again. This time, I wasn't going to beg for help. I wasn't going to play nice. I was done being scared. Hello? The manager's voice sounded groggy, like he'd just woken up. She's here, I said, my voice low and shaking. She's standing right outside my door. There was a brief pause before he responded. Okay, stay calm. I'm sending someone over right now. I didn't wait for more. I dropped the phone on the couch and turned toward the door. The knocking had stopped, but that only made the silence worse. I stood there, in the middle of my apartment, listening to the heavy thud of my own heartbeat. Minutes felt like hours. The silence was maddening, the tension in the air unbearable. I couldn't help myself. I moved closer to the door again, my feet moving against my better judgment. I tried to peer through the peephole, but her face wasn't there anymore. It was gone. I exhaled slowly, feeling a wave of false relief wash over me. Maybe she was leaving. Maybe she'd finally gotten bored and moved on. But as I stepped back from the door, I heard something faint, but unmistakable. A scraping noise, the unmistakable sound of something dragging along the floor, getting closer to the door. I froze again. What the hell was that? I moved back toward the door and pressed my ear against it. The noise was unmistakable now. It wasn't just any random sound. It was deliberate, and it was coming from the other side of the door. It was the sound of something, or someone, moving slowly, almost methodically, like they were circling the apartment, testing the locks. I stood there, barely breathing. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. I was stuck in place, caught in the web of my own terror. Then I heard a voice. It was soft at first, barely a whisper, but it was there, coming from the other side of the door. "Let me in." I jumped back, my heart pounding in my chest. No, it was her. It had to be her. I backed away from the door and bolted for the phone again. But as I reached for it, the voice came again, louder this time, more insistent. "Let me in, now!" I dropped the phone. I couldn't take it anymore. I was completely alone, and I didn't know how much longer I could handle this. I glanced around the apartment, searching for something, anything that could make me feel safe. But there was nothing. I was trapped in this room, with her outside, and there was no way out. The doorbell rang once more. 3 long, deliberate rings. And in that moment, I knew that this nightmare had only just begun. I could feel the panic rising in my chest again, tightening my throat until I could barely breathe. My eyes darted around the room, looking for anything to distract me, anything to make me feel less vulnerable. But there was nothing. Not a single thing that could stop what was happening, what was going to happen. I couldn't escape this. Couldn't outrun her. Couldn't outrun the fear she had wrapped around me like a noose. I had no choice but to face it. The doorbell rang again, this time louder, more forceful. It almost felt like a command. Let me in. I shivered at the thought, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I grabbed my phone again. I dialed the police number this time. My fingers slipped once, then twice. Finally, I managed to press the right digits. It rang once, twice, then 3 times before someone picked up. 911. What's your emergency? Someone's outside my door. I'm being harassed. I don't know what to do. Please, you need to send someone. My voice cracked, the desperation thick in my words. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Calling the police. But I was out of options. The woman outside my door had already crossed so many lines, and I had no idea how far she'd go next. The dispatcher asked me for my address, then reassured me that help was on the way. Stay inside, lock all doors and windows. Do not open the door until help arrives. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Please hurry. The phone went silent for a moment, but the weight of that silence was heavier than anything. I could hear her again, faintly at first. Soft murmurs, like whispers brushing against the door. I could barely make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. She was waiting for me to crack. Let me in. The words echoed in my mind as if she were speaking directly into my skull. It wasn't just a request anymore. It was an order, and it sent a wave of terror crashing through me. I was frozen, locked in place, unable to move as I listened to the haunting sound on the other side. I tried to focus. The dispatcher had said help was coming, but I wasn't sure if I could hold on that long. The minutes felt like hours. My mind raced, trying to prepare for the worst. Then the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. It was slow, methodical, as if she were savoring every second of the fears she was inflicting on me. I glanced at the clock again. It was nearly 3 a.m. The building felt more like a cage now than an apartment. I backed away from the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I was fighting the overwhelming urge to bolt, to escape somehow. But there was nowhere to go. I was cornered, trapped, and I couldn't even leave the apartment to avoid her. I held my breath, listening carefully. The knocking stopped for a moment. Silence. Then a soft scraping noise, like fingernails dragging down wood. It made my skin crawl. My stomach turned. I knew then she wasn't just knocking. She was trying to break in. I rushed to the window, peeking through the blinds to check the surroundings, desperate to find any sign of movement. The night was dark, the streetlights casting long shadows over the pavement. There was no one out there. No police, no neighbors. Just me. Just her. I backed away from the window, retreating into the center of the room. The phone was still clutched tightly in my hand. I looked down at it, trying to calm my shaking fingers. The only thing I could do now was wait. The longer I waited, the worse it got. My mind kept spiraling into thoughts of worst-case scenarios. What if the police couldn't get here in time? What if the building manager was too late? What if she forced her way in? Another knock. Knock, knock, knock. But this time it wasn't as slow. It was urgent, loud, almost frantic. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth was dry. My body ached from the tension. I wanted to move, to do something, anything. But I was paralyzed. "Let me in." The words rang out in my head again, louder than before. They weren't just outside my door now. They were inside my mind. I turned to the hallway, searching for any possible escape route. I could still hear her, still feel her presence creeping into every corner of the apartment. I wanted to run out the back door, but the only thing waiting for me out there was her, standing, watching, waiting. It didn't matter where I went. She would find me. I knew it. The phone buzzed in my hand, a message from the building manager. I called the police again. They're on their way. I stared at the message, feeling a flicker of hope. At least help was on the way. But would it be in time? Suddenly, the doorbell rang again, and this time, I couldn't breathe. It was like the world was closing in. My apartment felt smaller, the air thinner. I couldn't escape. Not like this. I took another deep breath, trying to steady myself. No more running, no more hiding. She wasn't going to let up, not until she got what she wanted. And now, I was starting to wonder what that was. And just as the thought crossed my mind, the doorbell rang once more. This time, it was followed by the sound of a loud crash. The crash was so loud, it shook me to my core. My body stiffened in shock. It wasn't just the doorbell ringing this time. It was something else entirely. Something had broken. I rushed to the door again, but this time, I didn't even dare look through the peephole. I knew. I could feel it deep in my gut. She was doing whatever she could to get inside, and the knocking, the scraping, the ring of the bell was all a prelude to something much worse. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't even manage a whisper. I moved back from the door, my mind racing. Could she have somehow broken the lock? Could she have found a way in through the window? I felt trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. My entire body screamed at me to do something, but I had no idea what. The phone in my hand buzzed again, and I snapped my attention to the screen. The message from the building manager was still there. "The police are on their way. Stay inside, don't open the door. You're almost safe. Almost safe. Almost." I clutched the phone tightly. How long would it take them to get here? How much longer before the situation escalated even further? I glanced at the door again. The silence that followed the crash was suffocating. The doorbell was no longer ringing. The scratching had stopped. But something was different. It was as if she was waiting for me to do something, to make the next move. I could feel her presence on the other side of the door, like a shadow, just waiting to consume me. The phone buzzed again, and this time, I hesitated before looking at it. My heart was thumping in my chest, a slow, rhythmic pounding that matched the anxiety coursing through my veins. "The police are at the front of the building. Please stay inside. Do not engage with her." I felt a small wave of relief wash over me. The police were close. Help was almost here. But I couldn't stop myself from wondering. Would they even be able to do anything? Would they be able to stop her before things got worse? Another crash. This time, the noise wasn't just outside my door. It was coming from somewhere inside the apartment complex. Somewhere in the hallway. The sound echoed off the walls, reverberating through the building. I jumped back, my heart racing. My thoughts went into overdrive. Could she be inside the building now? Was she already on her way to my apartment? I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep hiding. My body was trembling with fear, and I knew if I didn't do something soon, I was going to break down completely. I ran toward the window and threw the blinds open, peering out into the darkness. I couldn't see much. just the dim lights of the street below. No sign of anyone, no movement. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, she, was watching me. The paranoia gnawed at my insides. The building felt wrong now, like it was holding its breath, like it was waiting for something to happen. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. My heart stopped. Someone was coming, but it wasn't her. It was too steady, too measured. It was someone else. Someone who was walking like they knew where they were going. I turned back toward the door, barely daring to breathe. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I could hear someone adjusting their posture, their bodies shifting. I took another breath, forcing myself to stay still, to listen. A knock. My heart skipped a beat. Was it her? Was it the police? I didn't know. I couldn't tell anymore. The line between the two had blurred. I walked toward the door slowly, trying to move quietly, trying not to make a sound. The knocking continued, insistent and unrelenting. Knock, knock, knock. I opened the peephole just slightly, just enough to peek through. What I saw on the other side made my blood run cold. It was her. There she was again, standing outside my door, her eyes wide and dark, locked onto the peephole. Her face was pressed close to the door, and her grin was wider than it had been before, too wide. It looked unnatural. It was like she was savoring my fear. I gasped, stumbling back. The woman was staring directly at me, and for a second, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The weight of her gaze was crushing. But then something shifted in my mind. I couldn't take this anymore. I couldn't keep hiding, couldn't keep running from her. If I did, it would only get worse. She wasn't going to stop. She wasn't going to leave me alone. I picked up the phone and called 911 again, my voice shaking. Please, I need help. She's at my door. I can see her. I don't know what to do. Please, hurry. The operator's voice was calm but firm. We've received your previous calls. Help is on the way. Stay where you are. We're right around the corner. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the fear clawing at my insides made it hard. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, with no way down, no way out. The knocking resumed, louder this time. My stomach twisted into knots. I knew she was doing this on purpose, trying to make me react, trying to get me to open the door. I stepped back, away from the door, unable to even look at it for more than a second. I glanced at my phone again. The police were close. I just had to hold on. But then, just as I thought I might finally get some relief, I heard something I didn't expect. A voice. Faint at first, but unmistakable. Let me in. It wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum. My heart pounded harder than before. The time for running was over. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the police to get here and praying I wasn't too late. The words echoed in my mind, each one slicing through my thoughts like a blade. Let me in. I felt as though she were standing right beside me, whispering it into my ear, even though I knew she was still outside the door. It was as if her voice had invaded my very thoughts, burrowing itself deep inside my skull, and I couldn't escape it. I backed further away from the door, my legs feeling like jelly beneath me. The panic was overwhelming, suffocating. I couldn't stop shaking. What if this was it? What if this was the moment she crossed the final line and did something far worse than just knocking? I could feel my mind spiraling, and I had to fight to ground myself, to focus. I couldn't break now. I glanced at my phone again. The police were on their way. I repeated that to myself like a mantra. Help is coming. But with every second that passed, it felt like the room was closing in on me. It was the silence that made it worse. The quiet, empty seconds between her words, each one stretching longer than the last. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, the heavy thump echoing in the emptiness. And then there was the sound of the doorbell again. A loud, urgent ring, followed by another crash, this time harder. It felt like everything was about to break. I moved closer to the door once more, my body frozen in fear, but driven by something inside me. Something that told me I couldn't just sit here and wait. I had to see what was happening. What if she was trying to break in? Trying to get through the door? My breath caught in my throat as I cautiously peered through the peephole. What I saw made my stomach churn. Her face was still pressed up against the door. But now there was something different about her. It wasn't just the unsettling grin. It was the way she was breathing. Her chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths, and she was muttering something under her breath. It wasn't clear at first, just a mix of sounds. But then, just as I was about to pull away from the door in terror, I heard the words clearly. "You're mine now." A chill ran down my spine, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. I felt like I was going to collapse under the weight of the fear rushing through me. I could no longer pretend that this was just some misunderstanding. This woman wasn't just bothering me. She was obsessed, consumed by that obsession. I didn't know how much longer I could last. The minutes felt like hours, and still, I heard nothing but her breathing, her occasional mutterings, and the relentless ring of the doorbell. I stepped away from the door again, trying to regain my bearings. I needed to think. I couldn't just wait for the police to show up. I had to do something. I scanned the room, my eyes falling on the kitchen counter. I had a knife. A small one, but it was something. Maybe it would help me feel more in control, just for a moment. I reached for it, my hand trembling as I gripped the handle. It was cold against my skin, and I could feel my fingers slipping as the sweat covered them. I wasn't a fighter. I wasn't some action movie hero who knew what to do in a situation like this. But I couldn't just sit back and let her get to me. There was a soft creak from the hallway. The sound was so quiet, so delicate, that it almost sounded like a figment of my imagination. But I knew better. My heart skipped. She was in the hallway. I slowly moved toward the door again, knife clutched tightly in my hand. My body was shaking so violently, I could barely stand straight. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out, but my feet wouldn't move. They were stuck to the floor, glued by fear. All I could do was wait and listen. Then, without warning, the doorbell rang again, followed by another loud thud. This time, the sound of a kick. The door trembled beneath the force. My breath hitched. My heart stopped. Was she trying to break the door down? I stepped back, my pulse racing, and it took every ounce of willpower not to run. But I couldn't. Not without knowing what would happen next. Not without understanding how far she was willing to go. The door rattled again. The pounding grew louder, more desperate. Bang, bang, bang. It sounded like it was coming from all directions, the force behind each hit so strong that I half wondered the door wouldn't be able to withstand it. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. The silence was deafening. My mind spun in every direction, desperately trying to make sense of it all. Was she gone? Had she finally given up? Or was she waiting for me to come out? Waiting for me to make the next move? I dared not open the door. Not yet. But I couldn't just stand there either. I needed to know. I needed to see if it was over. I glanced at my phone. It felt like hours had passed. But in reality, only a few minutes had gone by since I'd called the police. Still no updates. Where are they? The seconds dragged on, and then a sound broke through the tension. It was a voice, muffled, but unmistakable. It came from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there." Her voice was cold, but there was something else in it, something unhinged. The sound of footsteps. Slowly, deliberately, they moved down the hallway. The floorboards creaked as they shifted, the weight of her steps making them echo. I could barely breathe as I backed away from the door, holding the knife in front of me like a shield, as if it could protect me from whatever was coming. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me to run. But I stayed still, my eyes locked on the door. And then, the doorbell rang once more. But this time, I didn't just hear it. I felt it. The sound of her presence right there, just on the other side. And as I stood there, frozen, I knew this wasn't just some misunderstanding anymore. It was the beginning of something much, much worse. The doorbell rang again, and with it came a sharp sense of finality, like an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence. This was it. I had no idea what had happened in the last few moments. Everything felt like a blur, but now it all felt like it was converging into one terrifying, unavoidable moment. I glanced around my apartment once more, my eyes darting from corner to corner. The phone was in my hand, but I knew there was nothing left to do. I had done everything I could. I called the police, I locked the doors, and I tried to stay calm. But now it felt like everything was slipping away. My grip tightened on the knife, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. I stood there, not moving, just listening. My breath felt too loud in the quiet of the apartment, and my heart was thudding in my chest. I couldn't escape. I was trapped in this nightmare, and I had no idea how much longer I could take it. The walls felt like they were closing in, the silence between the doorbell and whatever came next, suffocating me. And then I heard something. The faintest sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and coming closer. It was the kind of movement you could feel even if you weren't looking directly at it. The pressure was mounting. She was still out there. I didn't need to hear her voice anymore to know she was there. The very air around me felt thicker, heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't escape. I clutched the knife harder, my knuckles turning white. I had no plan. There was no next move in my head. I was just a person terrified in their own home, trying to hold on to any sliver of control. There was a moment, just a fleeting one, when I considered just running, barging through the back door, maybe escaping into the night. But I knew deep down that wouldn't work. She was here for something, and I feared that if I ran now, I'd never be able to shake the terror that followed. The footsteps stopped, and the silence once again fell over the apartment. It was unbearable. It felt like I was waiting for some clock to tick down, like the world was holding its breath with me. Then came the whisper, "I know you're in there." Her voice was so soft, but the malice behind it made my blood run cold. I I could almost feel her lips brushing against the door, hear her voice vibrating in the wood, close enough to touch. It was chilling in a way that didn't just make me fear for my physical safety. It made me fear for my mind. Her voice wasn't just an invitation to come out. It was a reminder that she knew me. She knew everything. And somehow, that was worse than the idea of her breaking in. I backed away from the door, my hand still gripping the knife as if it could give me the courage I desperately needed. I took a few steps, trying to calm my racing heart, but it was useless. Every muscle in my body was tense. I could barely think straight. What was she doing? I leaned back against the wall, trying to gather my thoughts. The next step had to come soon. But what was it? That was when I heard the noise again. But this time, it wasn't just a simple knock or a scrape against the door. It was something far worse. Something that made my blood run cold in an instant. The scratching. It was loud now, louder than before, almost like something metal was scraping against the doorframe. The sound was jagged, irregular, like nails digging into the wood. It wasn't random. It was purposeful. It was as if she was trying to carve her way through the door, through the apartment, through me. My hands were slick with sweat now, the knife slipping slightly in my grip. I could feel the panic crawling up my spine, my breath quickening with each drawn-out second. Every part of me screamed to run, to leave, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. It felt like hours passed, the sound continuing, echoing, reverberating off the walls, until, finally, it stopped. Silence. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it. But deep down, I knew. I knew she hadn't gone. The silence was far more terrifying than anything else. I couldn't hear her breathing, couldn't hear her footsteps. She was waiting. She was waiting for me to break, to let my guard down. I couldn't. I moved toward the door, my mind racing. I couldn't wait any longer. If I stayed here, I'd be stuck. If I kept waiting, I was giving her the power to control this nightmare. I had to take control. I stepped away from the door and moved toward the back window. I pulled the blinds up slowly, trying not to make a sound. Outside, the night was still, the streetlights casting long shadows over the street below. I could see no one, but I didn't trust that. I didn't trust anything anymore. She was out there, somewhere, watching. A sudden knock at the back door. I jumped back, my heart racing. I'd never heard it before. This wasn't the front door. She was moving around now. I felt trapped again, cornered. I couldn't think straight anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The police. They were outside. I had to be ready. The buzz of my phone cut through the tense silence, a lifeline in the suffocating dark. My hands shook as I pulled it from my pocket. The screen lit up. Police have arrived. Stay inside. Help is here. The words were a relief, yet still, I felt like I couldn't trust it. Was it too late? Had she already gotten inside? I wasn't sure. My mind was clouded with fear and confusion, and every sound, every knock, every scrape kept pulling me further into this nightmare. I glanced at the back door, my heart thundering in my chest. She could be there too. Was she trying to break in from the back now? The thought sent a fresh wave of terror through me. If she was smart enough to figure out one way in, she could be trying another. I couldn't stay still. The thought of being trapped in this apartment, with nowhere to go and no one to help, was unbearable. slowly moved toward the back door, my body stiff with fear. I pressed my ear against the door, listening for any sign that she was there. The sound of silence was deafening. It almost felt like I was in some kind of limbo, waiting for something terrible to happen. I reached for the handle, ready to open it and face whatever was on the other side. But I stopped short. My fingers hovered over the door, hesitant. I had no idea what was out there. Was it the police? Or had she somehow managed to lure them away, tricking me into thinking help was near? The phone buzzed again. I quickly checked it, my heart skipping a beat. We're outside. Don't open the door unless you're certain it's us. The message was clear. Don't trust anyone else. My stomach sank. I was relieved that the police were nearby, but the warning, the fear in the message, made everything feel so much worse. I stepped back from the door, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Every second felt like a lifetime. The situation had gotten out of my control, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it together. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the front of the apartment. It was so abrupt, so violent, that I nearly jumped out of my skin. The door shuddered against the force, the sound like something breaking. She was inside. I didn't need to see her to know. I felt her presence like a weight pressing down on me. I ran to the front door, my breath ragged. The phone was still clutched in my hand. I could hear her, faintly, but clearly now. Her voice, sweet but unsettling, filtered through the thin wood. "You can't hide forever." The words dripped from her lips like poison, making my skin crawl. "I'm here. I've always been here." Her voice echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that this wasn't a random encounter. It wasn't just a disturbed neighbor. It was something worse, something personal. She was fixated on me, and it wasn't going to end until she had me. I gripped the knife tighter, the cool metal steadying my shaking hand. Though it didn't feel like enough, I felt small, powerless. She was in the building now. I couldn't just hide in this apartment forever. I couldn't escape her. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made my heart leap into my throat. She was getting closer. I had no choice but to move. No more waiting. No more hiding. I was done being afraid. I bolted toward the hallway, my legs moving faster than I'd ever thought possible. I had to get out. Had to escape this nightmare. The police were close, but would they make it in time? Would they even get past the door? I opened the kitchen window, my hands fumbling with the latch. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't have time to think about it. I climbed through, my body protesting every move, but I didn't care. I had to get away from her. I had to get out of this apartment before it was too late. But as soon as I stepped outside, I realized I had made a horrible mistake. The moment I stepped into the alley behind the building, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of someone laughing. That laugh. Her laugh. It wasn't just a laugh, though. It was a distorted, twisted version of a sound that was supposed to be comforting. It made my skin crawl, my instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, caught in the trap I had foolishly walked into. I turned around slowly, feeling my breath catch in my throat. There she was, standing at the edge of the alley, just beyond the dim glow of the streetlight. Her face was a mask of fury, twisted in ways I couldn't comprehend. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt like the world stopped. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow across her face, making her appear even more unnatural. thought you could run?" she said, her voice low and mocking. "You thought you could escape me?" I opened my mouth to shout, to scream for help, but no sound came out. The fear that had been building in my chest now felt suffocating, choking me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then, as if she was reading my thoughts, she took one slow, deliberate step toward me. Every step she took toward me felt like an eternity. Her movement was slow and calculated, as if she were savoring every second of my fear, watching me unravel bit by bit. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak, as her eyes glinted with that same twisted, unsettling smile. The world around me felt distant, as though it were all happening through a haze. My heart hammered in my chest, and my breath came in sharp gasps. I wanted to run. I needed to run. But my feet wouldn't move. My body was betraying me, paralyzed by the sheer terror of what was happening. She stopped just a few feet away, her grin widening as she gazed at me. The streetlights flickered again, casting long shadows across her face, giving her an almost otherworldly look. I couldn't help but feel like I was staring into the face of someone who wasn't even human anymore. She wasn't the same woman I had seen when I first moved into this building. This person, this thing, was something darker, something far more dangerous. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling just slightly as she extended it toward me. I could see her fingers curl, as though she were trying to touch me, to claim me. "You're mine," she whispered, her voice soft but heavy with malice. "You've always been mine." I recoiled, instinctively stepping back. My pulse surged, and for a brief moment, I finally felt like I had control over my body again. I turned on my heels, ready to bolt, to get as far away from her as I possibly could. But just as I was about to run, I heard something. Something that froze me in my tracks. A car engine, a loud roar of the engine, followed by the screech of tires, the sound of sirens. I turned my head, barely daring to look, and I saw it. A police car, speeding around the corner, headlights cutting through the darkness. Relief. It washed over me like a flood, but it was short-lived. Because just as quickly as the police car appeared, it stopped, right there in front of the alley. But it wasn't just the police. Something else was happening. The car door opened, and I saw two officers step out, their guns drawn. They shouted something, but it was too far for me to hear. What was going on? I looked back at the woman, the one who had been haunting me for weeks. Her face was no longer twisted in that sick smile. Now, her expression had changed to something darker, something almost feral. Her eyes flicked between me and the police officers, as though calculating her next move. Then, without warning, she turned on her heel and ran, disappearing into the night faster than I could process. "No!" I shouted, instinctively trying to chase after her. But my legs felt like lead. My body still wasn't my own. One of the officers sprinted toward me, his face grim. "Stay where you are," he called out. "We've got it from here." I stood frozen, torn between my need to run after her and the presence of the officers who were now just steps away from me. The other officer called for backup, and within moments, more police cars arrived, their flashing lights illuminating the alley in a chaotic, almost surreal pattern. The sirens blared, and I could see them all in action now, moving with purpose. I couldn't believe it. She was gone, but I knew that it wasn't over. Not yet. I felt the weight of it in my bones. She wasn't done with me. She wouldn't be. The officer who had first approached me reached me, his hand resting on my shoulder as he spoke softly. "It's over, okay? We've got a perimeter set up. You're safe." But I wasn't safe. Not yet. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell him everything, about the doorbell, about the knocking, about everything she'd done. But nothing came out. I felt like I was still in a dream, like I wasn't truly here. I looked at the police officers, their faces set with determination, and for a moment, I wanted to believe they could stop her. I wanted to believe she would be gone for good. The officer beside me led me to one of the police cars, his hand never leaving my shoulder. He urged me to sit down in the back, and I obeyed numbly, my body still trembling from the adrenaline that had coursed through me just moments ago. As I sat there, watching the officers fan out into the alley, I realized just how close I had come to losing everything. This wasn't just some strange neighbor. It was something far darker. Someone who had been watching me for weeks, who had planned all of this. I hadn't even begun to understand what she was capable of. Minutes later, one of the officers returned to the car. "We found her," he said, his voice grim. "She's gone for now, but we'll be keeping an eye on her." I couldn't let myself feel relief yet. Not until she was behind bars. Not until she was away from me. I closed my eyes, leaning back in the seat, my body still shaking. The rush of fear was finally starting to wear off, but I couldn't stop the images of her from flashing behind my eyelids. Her grin, her eyes, the way she looked at me like I was her prey. It wasn't over. I knew it wasn't. But for now I was safe. For now, I was alive. The police officers gathered near the alley, talking in low voices as more cars arrived, lights flashing in the distance. I turned back to the window, watching the dark, empty street. I tried to gather my thoughts, but they were a mess. Like fragments of glass scattered on the floor. And just as I thought I might finally be able to rest, my phone buzzed again. A message from the building manager. "We're locking down the building. She's gone for now, but we're staying vigilant." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the weight of the truth settling on my chest. This wasn't over. The message from the building manager hung in the air, an unsettling reminder that while the immediate threat might be over, the danger was far from gone. "She's gone for now," he had written. But that, for now, felt like a ticking clock, counting down to the next time she would show up at my door, or worse, find a way inside again. I couldn't ignore that feeling. She had been persistent, relentless in her pursuit of me. And now, I was left with the same question I'd been asking for weeks. Why? The police were still combing the area, ensuring that she was indeed gone, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. She'd run off into the night, disappearing like a shadow. And that meant she was still out there, somewhere. I leaned back in the seat of the police car, trying to calm my thoughts. The flashing lights outside illuminated the darkness. But in my mind, the darkness felt deeper, more suffocating. It was like the night had stretched on forever, and with it, my fear. The officers were talking, and the muffled sounds of their voices reached me through the car windows. But I couldn't focus on anything they said. I needed to hear something definitive. I needed them to tell me it was over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The woman was still out there. And until they caught her, there was always going to be a part of me waiting for the other shoe to drop. I looked out the window, my eyes searching the shadows for any sign of movement. For a moment, I thought I saw something. But it was just the trees swaying in the wind. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. And I couldn't escape it. Every second was another reminder that I wasn't safe. Not really. The officer who had spoken to me earlier returned to the car, his face serious. He opened the door and slid into the seat next to me, letting out a long breath before speaking. "We've got a perimeter set up. We've spoken to every officer in the area. She's gone for now, but we'll keep an eye on the building. You're safe for the moment, but you're right to be cautious. We'll keep you updated." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they didn't bring me the peace I so desperately needed. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that they could catch her before she could do anything else. But the fear, it lingered, like a dark cloud, hovering over my every thought. "Do you think she'll come back?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The officer didn't hesitate. "It's hard to say. She's clearly fixated on you. If she comes back, we'll be ready for her. We're not letting her near you again." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I believed him. The uncertainty was too much to bear. She had already crossed so many lines. What would stop her from coming back, this time with something worse in mind? My mind raced through every possibility. She had been obsessed, yes, but what was the end game? What did she want from me? What had I done to deserve this? I felt like a pawn in some twisted game, and I had no idea when it was going to end. The officers continued their work, searching the alleyways, canvassing the neighborhood. But despite their efforts, no one had seen anything. No signs of where she had gone. No clues to explain her sudden disappearance. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Time passed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The building manager sent another message, assuring me that he would do everything in his power to make sure I was safe. But his words felt hollow now. The truth was, I was living in a constant state of fear. The fear of the unknown. The hours dragged on. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Every creak in the building, every sound in the distance, sent my heart into overdrive. I was waiting for the knock, waiting for the doorbell, waiting for her to return. I wanted to leave. I wanted to escape, to get as far away from this place as possible. But there was nowhere to go. She had followed me here, and I had no idea where else she might be lurking, ready to strike again. The next morning, I woke up to a message from the police. They had found something. My heart leapt into my throat as I read the text. "We found her. She's been arrested. You're safe now." For a moment, I didn't know how to react. It was a mixture of disbelief and relief. I couldn't believe it. After all the fear, all the nights spent wondering when she would come for me, it was finally over. The police had caught her. She was behind bars. But even as the weight of that knowledge settled in, I couldn't help but wonder, was it really over? Was this just a temporary reprieve? My phone buzzed again, and I saw another message from the building manager. "We've locked down the building. We'll make sure she doesn't get back in." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. But the unease never fully went away. She was caught. She was in jail. But the haunting memories of what she'd done, of how close she had come to ruining my life, stayed with me. And no matter how many times I tried to convince myself it was over, I knew one thing for certain. I would never feel completely safe again. Not as long as I lived in this building. Not as long as I knew there were people like her in the world. People who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. But for now, I was safe. And that, at least, was something. The police had caught her. She was behind bars. It should have been the moment I could finally breathe again, the weight of fear lifting from my chest. But every time I tried to relax, to let myself believe it was truly over, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Something deep inside told me that this wasn't the end. The building manager sent more updates, assuring me that extra security had been arranged, that they were taking every precaution to ensure no one else would come after me. I appreciated the efforts, but the unease never fully left. No matter how many times I told myself it was over, the memories of the last few weeks haunted me, lingering in the back of my mind. I tried to go about my day, trying to return to some semblance of normal life. I went to class, I ran errands. I even visited a cafe I used to go to. But no matter where I went, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see her there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was like she had become a part of me, a ghost I couldn't shake off. The apartment felt different now. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a cage, a place where I had been trapped by fear. Every time I walked through the hallway, my eyes would dart nervously, scanning the area. I couldn't help but expect to see her, to feel her presence lurking around every corner. It wasn't just her that haunted me. It was the whole experience. The police had assured me that I was safe, that she was caught and would be prosecuted. But what if they were wrong? What if she had an accomplice? What if she had a plan to come back? The questions piled up, each one more terrifying than the last. I had no answers. All I had were the memories of what she had done and the creeping fear that it wasn't over yet. A week passed. The police assured me they had everything under control, that the trial was moving forward. She would face the consequences for her actions, and I was safe. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of impending doom that loomed over me. It was like a storm on the horizon, ready to strike at any moment. One evening, as I was heading back to my apartment, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. A familiar face. A face I hadn't seen in days. The building manager. He was standing near the entrance of the building, his back turned to me, talking to someone. I couldn't hear the conversation, but as I drew closer, I could feel my pulse quicken. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something was off. The way he was talking to the person, the way he looked around nervously, it didn't feel right. I stopped in my tracks, watching from a distance. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of dread creeping over me. My instinct screamed at me to turn around, to leave, to get as far away from the building as possible. But I stayed rooted in place, watching the exchange unfold. The man he was talking to was tall, dressed in a long coat, and had their back to me. I couldn't see their face, but something about the way they moved, their posture, their stance, it was unsettling. It reminded me of how she moved, how she had stood outside my door, watching me. A cold chill ran down my spine. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. It could be anyone, but the fear that had been gnawing at me for weeks flared up again. Was it possible? Could she have someone helping her? Had she orchestrated some kind of plan from behind bars? I stepped back, ducking into a corner near the stairwell, my heart pounding as I tried to stay out of sight. I didn't want to make myself known. The last thing I needed was to confront whoever that person was. Not when I wasn't sure what was going on. I watched for a few more seconds, my breath shallow, trying to steady my racing pulse. Then the figure turned, and for the briefest moment, I saw their face. It wasn't her. The person had a different face entirely, one I didn't recognize at all. My heart slowed for a moment, but only for a second. The relief was fleeting. The building manager waved the stranger off and turned to head back inside the building. I waited until they were both out of sight, my mind still racing. Who were they? What was that conversation about? Why had the manager seemed so agitated? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed something that didn't add up. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from the building manager. Just wanted to update you. That guy I spoke to earlier, he's one of the officers who's been handling your case. They're gathering more evidence for the trial. You're safe. But that didn't make me feel safe. Not at all. Why had he looked so nervous? Why had he been talking to someone without telling me? And why did it feel like I had just witnessed something I wasn't meant to see? I tried to push the thoughts out of my mind. I had to push them out. The police were involved, and I had to trust that they would take care of things. I couldn't keep questioning everything, or I would lose my mind. But the uncertainty lingered. The question still echoed in my head. Was it really over? Or had I just been given a brief moment of peace before the storm came again? Part 15. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. That the fear I felt was just a lingering effect of everything that had happened. After all, the police were involved, and the building manager had reassured me that everything was under control. The woman was locked up. The trial was coming up. And I was supposed to feel safe. Yet, no matter how many times I told myself that, the feeling of unease never quite left. Each morning, I would wake up and remind myself that I had nothing to fear. But each evening, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows grew longer, the anxiety would return. I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched, as if someone, somewhere, was waiting for me to let my guard down. It wasn't just the feeling of being watched, though. It was more than that. There was a sense of foreboding, a kind of subtle dread that hung over everything. The things that had happened with the woman weren't something that just faded away. They stayed with me, lingering in the corners of my mind, just waiting for the right moment to resurface. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head, to stop obsessing over everything. I walked down the same streets I'd walked 100 times before, the routine of it almost comforting. The sun was shining, and for a moment, I thought I could actually breathe again. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. The sound of footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, but no one was there. Just the empty street stretching behind me, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves in the trees. I felt a chill run down my spine, my skin prickling with unease. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that someone was out there, just out of sight. I picked up my pace, trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that I was just being paranoid. But the feeling stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. I turned a corner, hoping to shake off the unease. But as I did, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. At the end of the street, standing under the shadow of a tree, was a figure, a tall, dark silhouette. I couldn't make out their face, but the posture, the way they stood so still, was all too familiar. My breath caught in my throat. My heart raced in my chest. I tried to turn and walk away, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my eyes locked on the figure as they slowly took a step forward. Then another. I took a breath and forced myself to turn away, to run, to get away from the feeling that was closing in on me. But when I looked back, the figure was gone. Nothing. The street was empty. I stood there for a moment, my chest heaving with panic. I felt like I was losing my mind. What was happening to me? I had seen her before. The woman, the way she had stood in the alley, the way she had waited outside my door, the way she had watched me. But I couldn't let it get to me. I couldn't. The police had caught her. She was in jail. I was safe. I forced myself to keep walking, trying to steady my breathing, but even as I walked, I could feel the weight of something behind me. That oppressive, suffocating feeling that had haunted me before. I got home and locked the door behind me, my heart still racing. I didn't know what to do with the feeling inside me, the feeling that I was still being watched. I tried to distract myself. I tried to tell myself that everything was fine, but every creak of the floorboards, every sound from the hallway made my pulse spike. Then I heard something. A knock. It was faint at first, barely noticeable. But then it came again, louder. A deliberate knock, like someone trying to get my attention. I froze. My blood ran cold, my entire body rigid with fear. My mind went blank. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could hear was the knock. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from the front door. I stood there, staring at the door, my hands shaking as I reached for my phone. I couldn't believe it. Was it her? Had she somehow gotten out? Was she back? I checked the screen, my fingers trembling as I dialed the building manager's number. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, I heard his voice on the other end, muffled but clear. "Hello? Is it her?" I asked, my voice trembling with panic. "Has she escaped?" The manager paused, his tone suddenly serious. No one's escaped. What's going on? Are you okay?" "I heard a knock at my door. It's happening again." I could barely speak, my words coming out in a breathless rush. "Please, you have to help me. I can't do this anymore." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before he responded. "Stay calm. I'll send someone over right now. Don't open the door. We're checking everything." I hung up the phone and backed away from the door, my mind racing. Who was it? Who was knocking? Could it be a mistake? Just a random person at the wrong door? The knocking continued, relentless, as if it was waiting for me to answer. And I knew, deep down, that whatever was happening, whatever was knocking on my door, was part of the same nightmare, the one I couldn't wake up from.